I am aware that most of my review videos are quite long, so I'm going to try my best to keep this one the opposite of that. Short, much like the campaign in Sniper Elite VR Winter Warrior. Now, I've had access to this game for just over a week, and in total it took me around 3.5 hours to blitz my way through the campaign. Now, just for the record, I was playing on normal difficulty. I died quite a few times on several of these missions, which meant I had to replay the whole mission several times to get through it, and I was lightly looking for collectibles whilst playing the campaign. I wasn't hunting them, but I was intrigued and I was checking areas and spaces that I wasn't necessarily directed to go and explore. So I think for most people, this game will take an average of 4.5, maybe 5 hours to complete. It depends on the difficulty you play and honestly how many times you die. But there isn't a huge amount of content here in this new Sniper Elite VR adventure. But why am I talking about the length of this game immediately at the start of the review video? Why is this the first talking point? Well, if you're in the VR community, you'll know that the length of VR games is quite a contentious point. A lot of VR games fall on the shorter side of the scale, and it doesn't always align with the price point, which means that the length of said game is usually a negative point in any review video. But I would say in this instance, for Sniper Elite VR Winter Warrior, the length of the game matches up with the price point. The game costs £10.99 in the UK or $14.99 in the US, so it is a budget price and it does align with 3.5 to 5 hours worth of gameplay. I wouldn't actually say that the length of this game is one of the negative points, so I needed to get that out of the way early doors. However, I do have plenty more negative points when talking about Sniper Elite VR Winter Warrior. I actually have a list of them on my phone and I'm going to be referencing it throughout this video. Now, if you're coming into this game looking for a sequel to Sniper Elite VR, then that's not what you're going to get, not in the conventional sense anyway. A sequel typically builds upon everything that made the original so great, whilst addressing the issues that players may have had with that original product. And even if a sequel doesn't take place in an entirely new environment, it should still do enough to feel like a new game. If you look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they take place in basically the exact same level. It's the same environment design. But Tears of the Kingdom does so much to make the new game feel new. It gives you new mechanics, a thrilling new story, an entirely new underground world to explore, plus the world in the sky to explore. It feels enough like a new game, whilst taking place in the exact same environment. Sniper Elite VR Winter Warrior feels exactly like the original game, to the point where I'm actually inclined to believe this was a planned DLC or update to that original game, which was scrapped or shelved and has now been released as a standalone product with very minimal marketing push to make a quick buck right before Christmas. Now, if I had infinite time and resources, which I don't have right now, I am drowning in video projects and I do still work a full-time job which is very busy at this time of the year, I would have actually revisited Sniper Elite VR to record some footage to put side by side with this footage to prove my point. But this game really does feel like a reskin of that original game. There's no new original content here, there's no thrilling new mechanics. It even takes place in essentially the same levels. The tutorial in this game is identical to the tutorial in Sniper Elite VR. It takes place in the same courtyard environment. You go to the same sniper target range, then you go and throw some grenades, then you fire the pistol, then you check out the assault rifle, and then you go and create your loadout in a little bin by putting guns into it. It's exactly the same in Sniper Elite VR. The only difference here is someone has used the MS Paint bucket tool to click white all over the world. Honestly, the biggest difference between Sniper Elite VR and Sniper Elite VR Winter Warrior is everything's white now. Everything's covered in snow. But the level design, this tutorial, the in-between sections between levels where you've got your old man hands and you're leafing through the dossier to pick the next mission, it's all exactly the same as that original game. This game feels like a DLC. It does not feel like a new standalone game. And if you're happy with that, if you enjoyed the original Sniper Elite VR, then you'll get a kick out of this. It's more of the same. But for me personally, it was too much of the same. Same tutorial area. And I actually suspect some of the levels are the same. Again, I didn't have time to go back and reference it, but a few of them felt eerily similar to some of the levels I experienced in the original Sniper Elite VR. And mechanically, it is exactly the same game. Okay, let's talk about the gameplay loop. Now, if you've played a Sniper Elite game before, you'll know the drill by now. You're dropped into fairly small scale environments that have a few different routes through to your objective. Your objective might be to secure some documents or perhaps blow up some artillery. And how you get to that objective is entirely up to you. You can sneak along, masking your sniped shots when noises in the environment take place, maybe a gun sounds, and you use that opportunity to take a shot so that you alert no guards. So you can play stealthy, and the game does encourage you to play stealthy. You can throw bottles and bricks in the environment to distract guards to a certain location, and you can even go up to them and take them down with a swift punch in the back of the head or hit them with the butt of your gun. That stuff's all pretty fun. But you could also run through the game like a rampaging maniac, and that's my favourite way to play this game. I've actually been playing it a bit like it's Doom. I just use the shotgun and I mow everyone down. There's no finesse, there's no careful planning, there's no tactics. I just run through the level and blow everyone away with the shotgun. And the game lets you do that, and I do like it for that fact. I like that it gives you the freedom to play how you like. You aren't forced into playing as a sneaky sniper. You're not forced into playing the game stealthy. You are rewarded for doing so. The missions have objectives that you need to hit. You can get 3 stars in each mission, and most of those objectives involve taking down enemies without alerting any guards, etc. But if you don't care about that stuff and you just want to have fun, you can run through all guns blazing. However, the act of actually using the guns and weaponry in this game is fairly hit or miss. At least it is for me. Using the sniper rifles is great. I really enjoyed it in the first game, and surprise, surprise, it's identical here, much like everything else is. So if you enjoyed it in the first game, you will enjoy it here. The X-ray kills, the slow motion kills, they are still the star of the show. Using a bolt action rifle, pulling it back, locking it into place, and then nailing a shot hundreds of meters away as the bullet zooms in slow motion through the skull of an enemy, popping their eyeballs and blowing their brains out the back of their head. It looks amazing in VR and it feels so fun. That is the best part of this game, hands down, and it was the best part of the original Sniper Elite VR, so it's no surprise that it's still the star of the show here. But then using the other guns, they kind of feel pretty unwieldy, and they have this strange icy feeling to them. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you're using an assault rifle or a pistol or a shotgun and you're moving it from side to side, it basically arrives at the destination that your physical hand arrives in later than your physical hand. So there's kind of a delay behind it. There's a lag to moving the guns from side to side or moving them around in the environment. And I think that's a conscious choice by the devs to make these weapons feel like they have weight behind them, to make them feel like they're heavy. But I really dislike how it feels. There's a strange disconnect when I move my hand from here to here and the in-game hand doesn't get here at the same time. It's a fraction behind. And I say icy because it reminds me of when I would play Mario 64 and you jump on an ice block and you stop, but Mario keeps sliding. It kind of feels like that, but for using guns in a VR game. And it makes the guns not feel great to use. And on that point, you cannot two-hand your pistol in this game. That was an issue that was prevalent in the original Sniper Elite VR, and it's still prevalent here. Which tells me again that this isn't really a sequel. They haven't listened to any of the feedback, and they haven't tried to innovate and build upon the foundations of the original game. This is just the original game, reskinned with wintry levels and snow falling from the sky. This game also does something really strange that the original did, surprise surprise, which I haven't ever really clocked onto until now. So when you play as the old man, reflecting back on his life as a sniper in between missions, you have floating hands that also have floating wrists. So your in-game hand when you're the old man is kind of cut off midway down your forearm. And that creates this weird kind of disconnect in game, because if I move my hand upwards, the wrist goes up as well, and I can actually move my wrist all the way away from myself. I don't actually mind floating hands in VR games. Shock, shock, surprise, horror. I think floating hands are fine. And if you're going to add a floating wrist or forearm, it needs to stay in a fixed position and the hand should rotate at the wrist joint. The wrist shouldn't float around unnaturally. That is so immersion breaking for me. It's so weird. But then when you play the actual sniper missions, you lose your wrist and it just becomes floating hands. So I don't know why they have the wrists in the old man bit. Really odd. It's just a strange thing I've noticed, and I cannot wrap my head around it. I dislike floating hands in games if they have a wrist or forearm that doesn't just hinge and move. It should stay like that and your hand should move. This is a tangent, but it's so strange and it feels weird in VR when I can move my wrist up and over itself. It's almost like I'm doing a front flip. Horrible, I hate it. Enemy AI is also pretty lacking in this game. Now again, I only played on normal. Maybe they get smarter when you play on the higher difficulties, but I could lure enemies to a doorway, I could funnel them there and just mow them down with my shotgun. It was very easy to do. You either shoot someone who's in that doorway or throw a bottle there, and they'll just start slowly moving their way to the door, and you can just stand there with a shotgun, blow them away. You haven't even really got to use your sniper in a game called Sniper Elite. There are a few missions where you have to use your sniper, but more often than not I was using the shotgun to move my way through the levels because it feels fun to blow these characters away, and they die in some hilarious positions. I have some good footage of that which I'll probably put behind me. But although the AI is pretty dumb, this game also does something which really frustrates me, and that's the fact that you can't hear enemies coming. It wound me up no end on one particular mission. I made base in a small house and I was sniping reinforcements as they were coming into the level. They're flooding in, they're coming from all directions, and I'm taking them out as I can see them coming. But if an enemy managed to get into the house and walk up the stairs and walk into the room I was in, I wouldn't hear them until they were peppering me with bullets in the back, and that often resulted in deaths and me needing to replay that mission. You should be able to hear footsteps of enemies coming, but it is not prevalent enough, if it's even there. I didn't notice it at all. If you're playing as a sniper, you'd think you'd be aware of your surroundings, but I guess real world snipers have spotters, so I need a spotter to tell me that someone's coming up the stairs to shoot me in the back of the head. I'll wrap it up by talking about the visuals. Visually, this game is pretty nice looking, but the levels vary in terms of their visual quality. The first proper level is probably the nicest looking level in the game. You've got a nice big castle to your left, you're walking down a snowy hill, there's a harbour to the right with some boats in it. That level looked great. I really liked the lighting, I liked the aesthetic of it. It was a good opening level and I thought, oh, this is cool, we're in for a treat here. But then some of the other levels just descend into snowy white canvases, broken buildings, and it started to feel super similar to that first Sniper Elite game. I truly wish I did have time to go back and play the original campaign, because I am certain some of these levels are the exact same as they were in that first game. I could be wrong, and if I am, I will hold my hands up, but some of them felt so deja vu-ish. It's crazy. Visually, it's absolutely fine. Particles falling from the sky like snow really look nice on the nighttime levels in particular, gives a sense of ambience to the level that I really appreciated, but it is still quite a static game. It's not a very interactive game. In the environments, you can pretty much only interact with the bottles and throwable objects like little cans and things, but outside of that you can't knock over chairs or blow out windows or smash up any of the rooms if you start shooting your shotgun. It's all a very static, locked environment that you play within, and yeah, it doesn't feel particularly like a VR game, which is a real shame, because fundamentally Sniper Elite could be an amazing VR game. If they'd actually made a sequel here, if they'd actually listened to the feedback of the original players and built upon the foundation that the original game laid, this could have been something great, but instead they didn't. This is just a glorified DLC packaged and marketed as a brand new Sniper Elite VR game. Now look, if you enjoyed the original game and you're happy with the £10.99 price point for around 4 hours of gameplay, I'm sure you'll have a good time with this. It's more of the same, but you might walk away feeling like I did. It's too similar. It's too much of the same. They haven't even fixed some of the fundamental issues that I had with the original game, and reusing entire portions like the tutorial and tutorial area and not even changing that up at all in the slightest. It's a real shame. This just isn't a sequel. It really is a DLC. I do think the price point versus the length of the game is about right, but there's too many fundamental issues with this that should have been improved upon after the original release. It just feels like something that was shelved and has now been thrown out with very little marketing at very short notice to capitalise on some Christmas Quest 2 and Quest 3 headset sales. And that's it. That was probably still longer than I'd like it to be. Normally I talk for about an hour for these reviews, and I've only spoken for 29 minutes. So let's see if I can edit this down into about 15 minutes. Hopefully you've enjoyed, guys. If you have, please do leave a like, leave a comment, hit subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you soon for another video. Take care.